Imagine growing up with a pot-smoking, drug-dealing hippie mom who gets raided by police when you're only 6 years old, no dad around, and somehow that exact chaos turns you into a 31-year San Francisco cop who runs the city's homeless outreach unit and earns medals of valor. Then, one dog bite starts a 10-year secret opioid addiction that ends with you walking into a pharmacy with a gun and a note that says, "I'm sorry."
I'm just this weak human being who can't even manage his own addiction, and walked into a pharmacy and robbed it because he's stupid, and he's too stupid to even figure out how to rob a pharmacy without getting caught.
This is Davin Cole's story, the full, unfiltered truth about how childhood trauma creates protectors and how the job can still break them. Stick around to the end. You need to hear what he says every department must change. This is Reasons We Serve, and this is his story. Can you introduce yourself for me, please?
Yes, my name is Davin Cole.
How long were you in law enforcement?
Total of 31 years.
31 years. And who did you work for?
I initially started with the San Francisco Sheriff's Department in 1989. I worked there for just over 4 years, and then lateraled over to the San Francisco Police Department, and that was in 94.
Davin, you describe your mom as a pot-smoking, drug-dealing hippie who got it. She was arrested when you were 6 years old during a search warrant. What was your experience like growing up with that kind of mom? Because I know your dad wasn't involved in your life at all.
Right. Yeah, no, my dad wasn't around. It was interesting, to say the least. You know, at my age, I didn't really comprehend a lot of what was going on. I just knew that, you know, it was always, don't talk about what mom does, don't tell people what mom does or what happens in the house. And so I knew it wasn't right. I knew something wasn't legal in a way, I guess. You know, and I've jokingly said before, you know, there was hippies coming in and out. You know, you look at a TV show about hippies and that's how they looked, you know, big leather floppy hats sometimes, or leather vests with the fringe hanging from it. And we had beads in the doorway and psychedelic posters in some of the rooms, and just pounds of marijuana coming in and out, and scales. Probably the younger cops wouldn't know this, but you know, the 3-beam scale that they used to weigh all the dope on back then. There's a three-beam scale in my mom's closet. So yeah, you know, I remember I did get to an age, probably around 9 or 10, where it did start to bother me. It was like, I don't like this. You know, I can't have my friends over to the house. I can't.
Oh, that's interesting. Why did it bother you?
Things like that. Like, you know, I couldn't bring friends to the house. You know, we never had birthday parties. My mom never threw us a birthday party. Everything was just us. And so you felt different. You know, my mom, you know, I say these things about my mom. She was a good mom. She really was a good mom. And she did eventually not sell drugs anymore. And she went back to school, and she actually ended up working as a union electrician at a local TV station for many years, till she retired. But it was just, she tried to have us live in better neighborhoods. So we tended to work in more working class neighborhoods than like what you'd expect maybe in poor neighborhoods, being on welfare and whatnot. So you just felt different. You know, we had long hair, whereas the neighborhoods we grew up in were predominantly Irish and Italian Catholic. So they, despite it being the 70s, they didn't have long hair. They didn't have, you know, there's a misconception that San Francisco in the 70s was just one big hippie city, and it really wasn't. It was just confined down to the Haight-Ashbury area. And if you went outside of the Haight-Ashbury area, you really didn't see it. You might see the 70s fashions of bell bottoms and things like that, but you didn't see that out-and-out hippie, pot-smoking community really outside of there. So where we lived, you didn't have that. And so they were more traditional. You know, dad was in their life, mom was in their life, mom stayed home, dad worked. It was, like I said, very traditional Irish, Italian, Catholic families there. And so you felt like an anomaly. You just felt different all the time. It, you know, it wasn't hard to make friends. My brothers are 6 to 7 years older than me, respectively. But, you know, we always made friends, but I've never really talked to them about it. But I know for me, I just felt a little bit different than everyone else. And, it carried over, in school, we'd go on field trips and, everybody would have $5 that their parents gave them to buy something at the gift shop. And that was never me. And everybody had the lunchbox, the metal lunchbox with, a cartoon character on it. That was never me, because we didn't have the money. We didn't have that stuff. So you start feeling very obviously different from everyone else. And when you're that age, it has an effect on you.
Do you think growing up in that, I'm just going to call it a hippie environment, do you think that helped you later on, or do you think that your childhood experiences kind of helped you deal with what you get later on in your career where you're dealing with the drug addicts and the homeless?
Yeah, I do. There is a negative aspect to it, but I think personally, career-wise, it made me a lot more empathetic towards people. And to know, because my mom's friends were all great people. I mean, these were many times father figures that came. They've taken us on overnight camping trips, and we would go up to they had houses up in the just kind of out in the woods, out in the countryside, and we'd go stay there because that's where they had their big marijuana farms. But they weren't bad people. They were all good people, and so when I got into it, and I would come across someone who had a drug problem or someone who was selling drugs, I didn't see them, I think, the way a lot of other cops saw them. I didn't have a hard-on to arrest every drug dealer. I didn't like the gang members. I didn't like the ones that were doing violence. But some you just understood. These were kids growing up in extremely poor neighborhoods, and that's all they knew. But they're not going down to McDonald's and getting a part-time job. That just doesn't exist in their neighborhood. So, I had more, I think, of an empathy for them.
Yeah.
And then same thing with the homelessness. There's such a tie-in to it a lot of times with drug use, that I just, I had, I think, more empathy than maybe some cops did.
Tell me about this. Your mom was kind of the hippie pot smoker, drug dealer. Dad really wasn't around, kind of a lack of stability in your household. I think in an earlier podcast that I watched you said that kind of led you to law enforcement.
Yeah, so there's a thing I found after, my whole experience of dealing with trauma, and that is, it seems to be a lot of first responders come from childhood trauma. And in talking to my therapist and other therapists and professionals in the field, I think we all agree that when you grow up in an unsafe environment, a lot of times it drives you into the type of career where you feel you're going to be able to give that security back to others. And I truly believe that's what drove me and a lot of other first responders, that, we just didn't feel safe. It's not a conscious thought. It wasn't in my head like, oh my God, I was alone as a child and I came home to an empty house every day. I want to be a cop so no one else has to do that. I think it becomes part of your persona and part of who you are on the subconscious level, that you want to be a protector. It's kind of like, people who grow up in trauma become therapists, right? They didn't have that help, and so they want to go into a field where they could provide that stability of therapy to others. And so you see that a lot.
But I wonder why you didn't, it's this lack of stability, and maybe you want kind of this family, why law enforcement and not like joining a motorcycle gang for the same type of brotherhood?
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. I did not, like I said, I loved my mom, and I did not want to disappoint her. And I never wanted to get in trouble growing up. I went to a very rough high school. The high school I went to had gang fights at least once or twice a month. We had gang fights outside in front or in the hallways. It was a very inner city rough high school. Gangs were a big thing there. I hung around with all the gang members at the time. They were my friends, they were my classmates, but I distanced myself when they were out doing their things, so I'd see them on Monday and they're like, oh, we stole a car on Friday, or we broke into this house yesterday and we got this TV, and you're a teenager and like, yeah, cool, but in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to disappoint my mom by going to jail. And I was a pretty scrawny kid growing up, so I don't think I would have done well in juvenile hall, quite honestly. I was a toothpick and not much of a scrapper back then. So, that also played into it. I'm like, I don't think I want to go to juvenile hall because these are guys I'm going to be with, and they're my friends here, but there's going to be guys in there who aren't my friends.
Yeah.
And so that played into a lot of it. I didn't want to go down that route. And also part of it, there came a point in my life where I did tell my mom, you know, she as she went back to work and got her electrician's license and became a union electrician, she would only just sell marijuana on the holidays around Christmas time to afford Christmas presents. And I don't know, maybe I was 11 or so. I do remember just telling her, you know, Mom, I'd rather never get a gift again in my life than to have you keep doing this, because I didn't want her to get in trouble again. I remembered the police raid in our house, and I remember, you know, that could have been devastating. She could have ended up in jail or prison. And so I just didn't want that for her. And I didn't want to see her take those chances just so I could have a Christmas gift. And I think I had more of a, I guess, law and order attitude. You know, like I said, my friends were stealing. I didn't like it. I wasn't like, oh, that's great, they're stealing. I just thought, you're kind of a tool, bro.
But why? You have this mom who's clearly breaking the law, but you have something within you that goes, I can differentiate between good and bad. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, like, for example, where do you think that came from? And what did your mom say when you told her, hey, I'm going to join the police department? So,
all right, so my older brother is a police officer too. So he joined the sheriff's department about 2.5, 3 years before me. So there was a little bit of that, you know. I looked up to my older brothers, and he wanted to be a cop, and I did too, and I kind of wanted to follow in those footsteps. My mom would jokingly say, tongue in cheek, oh, great, I raised 2 cops. But she was proud. She always made sure to tell us how proud she was of us, because I think she knew that because of our background, it probably did make us better cops at the end of the day. And that we did have more empathy towards people, and I think she appreciated that.
I look at your career and I see a real dichotomy. You, on the one hand, you got involved with canines, where I think, hey, you just want the bites, right? And you're kind of, I'm not going to say inflicting pain on people, but look, the dogs bite people.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, you spent a bunch of time working with homeless. Mm-hmm. Why'd you start with canines? And how'd you end up working with the homeless?
All right, so before I joined the police department, I worked security at a department store doing, the undercover stuff, catching shoplifters. And that was in downtown San Francisco. Well, the canine unit from the police department would come in at night and train in the store. And here I am, 19 years old, already decided, I'm going to be a police officer. I just thought, man, that was the coolest thing in the world, to have a dog and be a cop. I mean, come on, that's like, it is cool. I think canine cops have probably the best gig, out of the departments. So that's all I wanted to do. So once I did get in the police department and we're allowed to put our names on the waiting list for the specialized units, that's the only one. I didn't want to do motors. I didn't want to do gangs. No, I mean, a little bit of gangs, but I just didn't want to do it. Ironic part is I had a dope dog. So my dog was a patrol and a dope dog. And every time I had the opportunity to switch over to a EOD, a bomb dog, I turned it down because I liked finding dope. So, I'd get out there and find a bunch of dope for the coppers for their arrests. And I like doing that,
Okay, so but why the dichotomy? Why canines to, it seems like, almost social work where you're dealing with the homeless? How do you get involved in that?
That is more circumstance. I originally had planned to just stay a canine handler the rest of my career, because once we get in our unit, you don't have to leave. And I was just going to stay there. And then I was going to retire, and that was going to be that. And as I got further on in my career, especially as I was like, okay, I'm probably got a little bit less than 10 years left, maybe I should get a little bump in pay to help with the retirement. So, I'm going to look at a promotion. Wasn't like, that's all I want to do, but, I'll be a sergeant. And I always had a lot of self-doubt, and this played in later on to how I viewed myself and some of the trauma, but I always had a lot of self-doubt that I'd even be good at it. So I didn't want to take the sergeant's exam for the longest time. So I finally said, no, I want to do it. I want to raise, maybe going back to patrol wouldn't be so bad. So I do that. I get promoted sergeant. And of course, the first thing they do is they put me a year in investigations. I'm a street cop. I'm not a detective. I never wanted to be a detective. A lot of officers love it. They can't wait to get into investigations. And for me, it was just, nah. And I did it for a year, and I'm a hardworking cop, and I think I did good at it. I loved interviewing people, and that kind of became my forte, was doing the interviews and trying to get confessions. And then after that, I get put back into patrol, and I get put back at So ironically, the station I was assigned at the most is the same district I grew up in. So my house was in the Mission District where I lived. The schools I went to was in the Mission District. And so I got assigned to the Mission District as a patrolman. And then when I got promoted to sergeant, I get back sent in the Mission District. Well, that district had the highest incident of homelessness. And we had streets, like 3-4 straight blocks of impacted sidewalks with tents. So you could not walk down these sidewalks for 3 or 4 blocks. It was underneath a freeway overpass. So it provided protection for the elements. And it was just because of the nature of politics in San Francisco, they didn't want the police involved with homelessness at all. They viewed it as a social issue and we should completely stay out of it and let the homeless outreach team deal with it. Well, Super Bowl 50 comes, they have to make the city look pretty and shiny, and they move any of the other homeless out of the areas where we were going to have the events, and they all just pushed into the Mission and pretty much doubled that homeless population. And so the city decided they needed to come up with a better method of dealing with this, and they were going to need the police to be involved. So they started a collaborative effort between multiple city agencies, and I don't know why. I made my reputation as being a hard worker, I guess. The commander called me. It's like, hey, they're starting this homeless outreach program in your district, and I want to assign the current citywide homeless outreach officers to you. They're going to work out of your district now. And can you just start attending these meetings? I was like, okay, sure. I didn't even know what they were about. I had patrol stuff. I would just sit in this meeting for an hour. Like, why am I here? I don't like, they're all talking about going out to homeless encampments, and I'm like, okay, great, go have fun. I got shootings and whatnot to go deal with back on the other side of the hallway here. But as that success started to grow, my captain was like, hey, no, you need to be out there. Like, that's your unit. You got to be with them. You got to be really more involved. I'm like, oh, okay, yes, sir. That's my job. Good soldier, went in there. So started like, oh, okay, I see what we're doing here. We're collaborating. We're strategizing how we're going to tackle these various homeless encampments. So we had a lot of success, and those streets that used to be 4 blocks long on both sides were gone. We cleaned it out. We got them into services. We got them into shelters. Some of them just got moved to other spots, but it was successful. And so they wanted to grow it citywide. And so that's when they came to me and they're like, listen, we're growing this to a citywide unit. Would you like to transfer into this new unit and be in charge? I was like, okay, yeah, that'd be great. So that's how it kind of rolled out. And then once I got into it, I was like, okay, this is my job. And that's how I've always been. You give me a job, I'm going to do that job. When I was in the K-9 unit, and unfortunately we lost our sergeant to a massive heart attack, and he was the trainer, I was like, all right, I'll take over the training. And I did. And I just took as much training as I could get the department to send me to, and watched videos and read books to make me, hopefully I was a really good dog trainer for the department. So when I got put in charge of the citywide homeless outreach I was like, okay, let me become more involved and figure out, can we improve what we do from the law enforcement side? And then it grew. Next thing you know, it was me and 7 officers. Then it was me and another sergeant and 18 officers. And all of a sudden, they're like, hey, you're going to be promoted to an acting lieutenant, and you're going to be in charge of 42 officers and 4 sergeants along with another lieutenant.
Do you think it got worse? Because I think of California, I think of homeless problems,
right.
Homeless problems. San Francisco, Los Angeles, to an extent, a little bit of San Diego, but I just think of California as a major homeless issue. When you got out, or not got out, because we're going to talk about that,
yes.
But when you left or forced to leave,
yes.
or whatever you want to call it, do you think it got worse?
I do. What happened was COVID really put a dent. It was a combination. It was, as I said, like a perfect storm. So COVID hits. They're trying not to be as, I don't want to say heavy-handed, but they're trying not to be as strict with the homeless at the time because of COVID. And then all the Floyd George and all the other police incidents that came up, that all of a sudden you had this defund the police. And once again, they went back to, we don't want the police involved with homelessness. And that's exactly what happened around the country. And so agencies where they were able to go in and have some meaningful impact on the homeless encampments were suddenly told, no, we don't want you dealing with this. And it blew up again to what it was worse. Because then you had fentanyl. And I'm sure you've never seen anything like this. I came in the late 90s or late 80s, early 90s when crack was out of control. And we had the gang shootings, the amount of violence, and you would see what people would do for crack. And I'll spare the audience all that, but we all know what people will do for crack, both women and men. And then meth came back. And meth kind of died down for a little bit. And then meth came back. And then we just started seeing the mental effects on people on meth and their long-term use. And you're like, wow, this has caused some serious mental health issues with these long-term meth users. And then fentanyl came. And it was like nothing I had ever seen before. The behavior of people on short-term use of fentanyl was beyond anything I've seen with meth. It would boggle our minds because fentanyl was just hitting as I neared the end of my career. And I just couldn't believe what was happening. So you had that storm of COVID and the defund the police, and they don't want the police, and we don't want them going after. These are just drug users with a problem, and we need to treat them. And it was hands off, and it just blew up to the point where you saw people wanting changes. And you saw people say, no, we don't want this in our community anymore. And, you know, they always say when it gets to the NIMBYs, that's when you're going to see things change. You know, they're not my neighborhood. It's fine if it's happening over there, but now it's happening here. And that's, from what I've read in other cities, I know in San Francisco, it was now an issue in neighborhoods that you didn't have those issues.
Do you think drugs are the main cause of homelessness?
Yes. I think the myth the homeless advocates want to tell you is it's a housing crisis. It's not a housing crisis. If there's any type of housing crisis in that community, it's what they call extreme poverty housing. There's no very low income housing. And unfortunately, it just doesn't really exist anymore. You know, we have the government housing, you know, the HUD, the projects as people would refer to them. We have that, and there's not enough of that. But when you have a drug problem, you're not going to succeed in housing. And it's a combination of the mental health and the drugs. I think that's what drives easily 90% of it. And then you kind of get into the nitty gritty of what people are talking about homeless, because there's people that live out of their cars and people are like, well, they're homeless. Okay, they're homeless. You're right. They don't have housing, but they're still in a way stabilized. They have a car that they can move. They generally have some type of work or money coming in. You know, when I think of homelessness, and I think when most people do, we're talking about someone in a tent or not in a tent, in a cardboard box or what have you, sleeping on the street, covered in their own feces sometimes, high as a kite on drugs, or whacked out from mental health, either from long-term drug usage or they're self-medicating a pre-existing mental health issue with drugs. That's what I think most people see as homelessness. But what the advocates will try to tell you is, you know, there's people living in campers and there's people living in cars, and also people that couch surf. You know, they want to include them as homeless, and it's definitely part of the conversation, but it's not what's driving the stress in everybody's life. People aren't stressed out about someone sleeping in a car or sleeping in a camper in general. When you get 20 campers on a street, then you have a problem.
Did you see an uptick in homelessness? If drugs are the main issue, did you see an uptick in homelessness when you had these legalization issues going on in California?
Yes, absolutely. It absolutely contributed to it, because one thing that they don't really want to talk about, but we all knew it was coming, and anybody who's worked in law enforcement or in the judicial system understood, when there's no consequences to your drug usage, the odds of you getting help decreased tremendously. I mean, it just goes way down. They know that for a lot of people, jail was their final step to get help. And maybe it took 5 or 6 stints, but there comes a point of, I don't want to be in jail anymore. They finally get sobered up, you know, and they get detox, and they're finally able to make a rational decision. And that's when they're finally able to make it. But now when you don't have the consequence of going to court, now you don't go to court and have a judge say, hey, here are your options. You could go spend the next year in jail, or you could go join this drug program. And maybe the success rate wasn't the highest, but it was a start for many of them.
I keep hearing this term, the industrial homelessness complex, right? And I'm going to circle back to this at the end, But do you think the people, the social aspect of it, not the enforcement, but the social worker aspect of it, do you think that they really, well, first of all, do you think that they believe that drugs are the problem as well? Or do you think they have a different idea of how to solve the problem?
I think many of them come into it with a preconceived notion of what it is and that it's not drug driven. And so in their mind, I think they don't want to have to admit that, wait, this is really a drug problem. And so they'll fight against it and they'll push back against it. There's many out there who do come out there and go, yeah, these people need mental health and they need to be in a program. But it's rare, honestly, to meet a civilian on the social side who will advocate any type of incarceration for people in drug crisis.
Why?
They just don't think it helps, which is ironic because I also ran another program called the LEADS program. It's the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. The idea of that program is to take people committing lower level crimes that were committed to support their drug habit and to connect them immediately with services. So we could arrest someone on the street, someone that we've had many contacts with, and we could say, hey, you know what, I think you'd be a good candidate for LEAD. If you agree to it, I'll have a social worker here in 30 minutes for you. And from that point on, that social worker is going to help you as your case manager and get you into whatever services you need, and we'll hold these charges in abeyance for 30 days. And as long as you participate in the program, we'll drop those charges in 30 days. Any new charges, that's on you. But this one charge, we could do that for you. The civilians that were in that program, the ones who were former drug addicts, almost 100% would say, yeah, some of these people need to go to jail. And they're just pure, simple social workers, or the people that are part of these NGOs, these non-government organizations, these, as they call them, nonprofits. They did it. They were like, nope, that's wrong. That's why we have these programs. That's why we're here. We're trying to reduce the incarceration rate.
But do you think that they're doing that because they don't want to solve the problem and they're just constantly getting money from the government?
I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but I will tell you this. Nonprofit does not mean no profit. That's what people need to understand. Nonprofits make money. They just are supposed to turn that money back around into it. The people running those organizations make good money. They're making mid to upper level six-figure salaries running these nonprofits. So are they de-incentivized to solve the issue? I would say, I do know of times where I've had access to budgets and to available services, and I've seen that just doesn't make sense to me fiscally, why they would do that. Why would we pay this amount of money to have an outdoor sleeping village for homeless to be in a fenced-in area where they're safe and fed? I mean, the amount of money that was being spent on that could easily buy a 30-unit apartment in San Francisco and still provide all the same services. So I would sit back and go, that makes no sense to me. But maybe I'm ignorant in how that works, but I don't think so. I think there is an industrial homeless complex. I think, not all, there's some great nonprofits out there, and I don't want anyone to think I'm bashing nonprofits, but I think there are many that are de-incentivized to solve the issue.
Let's talk a little bit about your career. Tell me these two stories. Tell me about the gang member shooting at you with the sawed-off shotgun.
Yeah, I was early in my career. I think maybe 3 years in at the most. I'd finished probation and transferred to another station and been there about 2 years when that happened. But yeah, my partner and I were working plainclothes. We've been in plainclothes unit for a little while and focusing primarily on the gangs in our district. And we'd had a shooting at this one park before where we knew the gang members would hang out a lot. And a call came out that there was kids hanging out in the park, teenagers hanging out in the park. And so we knew it would be the local gang members. So my partner and I, we walked in the park, and it's a big park. It has a gym and an attached rec center. And on the backside is a huge open field, large enough for two baseball fields, two like kids' baseball fields. So we walk around the back, got our stars out, we had flashlights in our hand. And as we start walking towards them, They jump up and they yell 5-0, which is, the street slang for police. And they all start taking off running. And so my partner and I, first thing we do, we're like, oh, we're in a foot pursuit. Let's go. And we start running. Well, one guy was waiting there kind of around the corner. There's like a little indet between the rec center and the gym where a hallway went. So it kind of created this natural alcove. And as we came around that alcove, he was sitting there with the shotgun waiting for us. I didn't see him. My partner hadn't seen him. As we came around the corner, I was focused on two guys here. My partner saw him with the shotgun, and before he could even yell out gun, the guy fires off one round. We know he couldn't get a second round off because these idiots had sawed, if anybody's familiar with firearms, they had sawed the barrel of the shotgun back below the forestock. So when he fired the shotgun, it blew the forestock off and it jammed the gun, so he couldn't rack any more rounds. So they're not rocket science, thank God. The fact that it was birdshot and the fact that it hit that forestock is probably what saved us from getting hit. And there's, unfortunately, our investigations back then had a lot to desire. So there was no CSI. There was no, gang task force came out after we had everybody back at the station just to kind of wrap things up. So, I remember my partner and I looking at each other. By the time I came up to shoot him, he dropped the shotgun already. And the same with my partner. By the time he ducked back behind cover and peeked back around, the guy dropped the shotgun. So we didn't shoot him. But after, we put out the emergency and everyone gets there and we get people in custody, we're like checking ourselves. Like, okay, where am I hit? Where am I bleeding from? Because I know I'm bleeding. There's no way. This guy couldn't have been more than 10 feet from us. So we're just like, there's no way they missed. And nothing. And talking to our range masters and looking at everything, I think there's probably good chance that we at least were hit by some of the birdshot, but it had dispersed the velocity so much that with the adrenaline and everything, it couldn't penetrate. We're wearing jeans and heavy jackets. It was in the winter time. And it probably just kind of, in a way, bounced off. And we just didn't know it. And because there was no crime scene collection, nobody went out there and diagrammed it. And so we never know on what happened with that. And then, fast forward 2-3 years when the case finally goes to trial, their argument was, since I didn't see him with the gun initially, my partner was lying about who he saw, the person with the gun, and the person that actually shot us had somehow scaled the wall and escaped over a 1-story building. So Spider-Man was part of this gang apparently, and Spidey crawled his way, and we didn't see it because, we're cops and we lie. And the jury fell for it and they were acquitted. And that's, I'm not gonna say it's traumatic, but it affects you. We walked out of there going, how did that happen? Like, how in the world did somebody try to kill us and walk away scot-free?
Wait a minute, I gotta, let's talk about this because I'm always curious about this because I think this may be kind of the downfall of what happens to our society. In San Francisco at the time, was that common for juries to really?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
Is that just an attitude of the police are all a bunch of liars? We don't believe you. What is that?
Yeah, it's a combo of it. Is a very liberal city. How are juries selected? By people who don't have something to get them out of jury duty. So, you have money or you have means, you're more likely to get out of jury duty, and that leaves, people that may not be working or people that are on the lower income strata who may not have a positive opinion of law enforcement. And again, being a very liberal city and combining in all the negative press that's constantly out there, it wasn't uncommon to have something like that happen in San Francisco. And it's disappointing. I don't know if it's gotten any better. Maybe in the last 2 years it has, because the liberalism's changed a little bit and the dynamics, more people in the tech industry and they don't like getting their $5,000 laptops stolen from their cars. So they may be liberal, but they don't want their cars broken into. So they want to be a little tougher on crime. The old joke that a conservative is a liberal that was robbed. I kind of feel that way.
Totally.
But yeah, it was disappointing. It bothered me for a while. And again, I was a young cop, and it still threw me off that, wow, this actually does happen. And people will not believe us, even something so serious. Why am I going to say this guy shot at me?
Right. Tell me about the story about you firing your gun after you were struck by a car.
Yeah, that is while I'm on probation. So here I am.
So really early on.
Really early on. Well, I'll go back 1 second on my first day on the job. So I do the sheriff's department for 4.5 years. That's all custodial. San Francisco Sheriff's Department. San Francisco is one county, one city. So we don't have rural areas. We don't have unincorporated areas. So the sheriff's department is primarily custodial. I get out on, so I finally get in the police department. That's where I wanted to be. I did the sheriff's because my brother was there and the police department wasn't hiring. They're finally hiring again. I get in. I go through a modified academy and 6 weeks in the academy. And now I get assigned to my first station. I get there first day, 6 in the morning, meet my FTO, my training officer. We spend about an hour going over paperwork and supplies and grabbing site books. And the call comes out of a lady threatening to stab herself. And show you how old this was. She was at a phone booth. For you kids out there, it was a machine that you put a coin in to call someone. You didn't have one in your pocket. So we go out there, and there's a lady, probably in her 50s, and she's got probably about a 16-inch butcher knife. And she turns and starts coming at us with the knife. And I'm backing up, yelling out commands. My partner's yelling out commands. She was only a Spanish speaker, and my Spanish was back then. Luckily, a friend of mine, kind of a mentor of mine, he shows up and he starts giving her commands in Spanish, and we're backing up. She finally stops. And we didn't have tasers back then. We didn't have ERIWs. We had none of that less lethal stuff. It was a baton and a gun, and that's it. So everything's said and done. She gets handcuffed. She gets put on a mental health hold, and off to the hospital she goes. And here I am with my FTO and these senior cops all laughing how I almost killed someone my first day on the job. And I was like, I don't want to, wait a minute. Everyone told me you could go 25 years and never fire your gun, and I almost killed someone 2 hours into my first shift. I'm like, wait a minute. And they thought it was a joke. Then they start naming off all the guys they knew who shot and killed someone on their first year on the job. And I don't want to hear this. Come on, I just want to get through my probation and my training. So now fast forward, I do my FTO. I go to my probationary station. I have a regular partner. We're looking at it for a parolee at large. He'd already ran from the cops 2 or 3 times in the last couple of days, and they kept having to cancel the pursuit because it was during the daytime. But we knew he hung out in our sector at these projects, and there he goes. He drives right by us. We're like, hey, there goes Omar. So we put out in the radio. We circle around. We catch up to him. Chase is on. So he's in a 5.0 Mustang. We are, because of our district at the time, it was a very rough and tumble district, and we got in a lot of car chases. They didn't like giving us the newer cars. We had a lot of the old beat up police cars, but we kept up with them. And I remember at one point we were like on the freeway at like 115, and he's still pulling away from us. And I was just about to cancel the pursuit. I'm like, there's still way, we're not going to catch this guy. But the freeway ends. He has to get back on surface streets, and we chase him. He eventually loses control in an intersection, ends up in a big dirt parking lot. We pull into the lot, and we're thinking he's going to foot bail. And as I get out of my car, I didn't realize he was still in his car. And so my car is here, facing like straight ahead, and his car is at an angle, and he just guns it right at me and hits me and pins me between my car and his car, backs up, hits me again, but this time kind of goes a side swipe. That's when I start firing. I didn't know. It was funny. I didn't even know this until like a year later when my partner and I were just going over it again. He'd already started shooting when the guy was coming at me because he knew I was going to get hit and I had nowhere to go. I never even heard his gunshots. They talk about the auditory block and things. That's what I have, is the auditory block. It was just like pop, pop, pop. Even my own gunshots were very, very low, and I didn't even hear his. He hits me. My driver's side door eventually gets bent all the way forward till it's kissing the front fender of the car, and he takes off. And we thought he couldn't get out of the lot, but there was another exit out of the lot. He pulls out, he's gone. And he doesn't get caught for about 4 months later. And I know I unloaded at least one magazine, my partner, half of his, and then his gun jammed another unit that he crashed into. They opened up on him. So there was all the broken glass from his windows. But once he was caught about 4 months later, they couldn't even get a subpoena to search his body to see if he had any scars or anything, which I thought was, wow, like, we just want to know, did we hit him? And like, kind of add to the case, like, here's a fresh bullet scar.
Did you get hurt in that incident?
So I ended up with a bruised elbow. This is it. Again, we go back over, we look at it. My car door was open. The way my partner and the other officers described it, we think because my door was open, that when he hit me, my body kind of went into the car, so it didn't get squished. I just went into the open portion of my door. They said it went up about 3 or 4 feet, like kind of up like that. I don't remember any of that. But that's our only guess. That and God looks out for cops and idiots, and I'm both. So I think I had double God's blessing, because, all right, I get hit by a car, I get shot at like a year and a half later, and that doesn't take me out. But we do know what does take me out.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. What was your injury that you suffered that was eventually the beginning of the end for you?
Yeah. So it said, I went in the K9 unit. My name came up, and I got in a unit, and I was there for a total of 15 years. Unfortunately, we lost a sergeant due to a massive heart attack, and he'd been the trainer. And so I took over the training with another officer. And we were just doing a non-bite scenario. We called it tactical obedience in-house, because, cops, you put tactical in front of it, sounds more fun. So, but, it was a movement thing to approach a hot zone tactically. So, if there's a gunman, safely move with your dog. So there's no bite work involved. So of course, I didn't have on a bite suit. I was just training and working with the other officer doing the movement. And the dog didn't get the memo in the beginning, didn't listen to the debrief, and he came around and got me right in the leg and just latched on and shook it and left about a golf ball size hole in my calf on one side and maybe a peanut size on the other. It was bad. It was a really, really bad bite. Straight off to the hospital. 3 days later, they send me home with antibiotics, and 3 days later, I'm walking around and my leg is just ballooned up. I didn't notice. My wife noticed it. She's like, your leg doesn't look good. And ends up, it was a bad infection. So now I'm in the hospital for 7 days. Get out of the hospital. Of course, they have me on pain medicine, antibiotics. I'm on disability for 4 months. Eventually, I go back to work. But the pain's there. The leg is just hurting. Like, man, just wouldn't go away. And I was about 8 months from when I got bit. And I'm calling in a refill. And I'm not worried about it. Like, I have pain, and so I'm not worried that I'm taking these pills. And then I'm taking the right amount. I'm not going over. I'm not asking for a higher dosage. But I do remember calling in the refill and asking the doctor, I'm like, it's been like 8 months. Like, when is the pain going to go away? He's like, it was a really bad bite. He goes, you remember it was a really bad wound and the infection. He goes, it might be a good year or so before the pain starts to subside. So I was like, oh, okay, that doesn't sound good, but all right, it's a year. I'm 8 months into it. Well, a year goes by, going into like the second year now. And I'm starting to realize I'm really enjoying the pills. I'm still in pain. I'm waking up in pain. I'm going to bed in pain. The pills can't wipe out the pain completely. The best I can hope for is maybe a level 3 out of 10 pain. That's the best days. The worst days, it's at 8 and 9, and I can't sleep. The pain's going up my back. And eventually what they diagnosed it was with impinged nerve in my leg. So as the scar tissue healed, the scar tissue was pushing against the nerve, and it's an actual nerve bundle. So it's not a singular nerve. It's where they all kind of branch out, including the sciatic and other ones. So the pain would go down my leg into my toes. It would go up my back, down my arm, into my fingers. That's on the bad days. It was really and there's nothing they could do. The pain medication, like I said, most days just brought it down to a 3. But I also knew I really like taking these pills. I've talked to a lot of first responders. It's pretty much universal. We say it was our happy pill. It just put us in a good mood. I didn't get dopey or drowsy. I was just in a good mood once I got them in my system. And we had an 8-hour window. So as long as I didn't take a pill 8 hours before my shift, I was good. If it really started to hurt a lot in the shift, I could just put myself administrative duties and take off my radio and gun belt. And we had coverage, and that would be okay. I could do some paperwork or whatnot. Or I'd just have to go home. Be like, hey, I can't, Sarge, but the leg's hurting me. I need to take something for it. And he's like, all right, go home. It's on duty injury. You're covered. Now we're getting up to almost 2.5 years. And I remember doing a follow-up with my pain manager. And I had a neurologist, a pain manager, a psych pain manager. But I remember asking the neurologist, I'm like, hey, what is my long-term prognosis with this leg? Because it's almost 3 years and the pain's still there. And I remember he looked at me and he's like, this might be as good as it gets for you. And man, that was a punch in the gut, because it's chronic pain. Chronic pain is horrible. I don't wish that on anybody. It bothers me a little bit that we're cracking down so much on the pain meds, because I do know there are people that truly need them. Mm-hmm. I mean, it helped with the pain. The opioids helped with the pain, no doubt. They tried other medicines. It didn't work. And I know people, and I have family members, fortunately and unfortunately, that are on opioids, but it does help them. But, just to hear that, waking up in pain, going to bed in pain, it's psychologically taxing too. Because you have to now think like, okay, what am I doing today? Like, am I walking on the sand on the beach really bothered me? It's the flexing of the muscles in a way that really aggravated that nerve in the calf. Going on vacation, I have to make sure, do I have enough? Is this going to last me through my vacation? Or do I have to have them get a 2-month order so I can take it with me? And that's a lot of extra paperwork. So like you got to show them your plane ticket. You got to show them your hotel dates. They want proof that you're going. So it becomes part of your life. And so I'm not ashamed to admit, I walked out of that appointment. I sat in my car for about 10 minutes, just in tears, just going, I was probably like 45 at the time. And I was like, I can't be in this kind of pain for the rest of my life. Like, what's it going to be like when I retire? Is it going to get worse? Am I going to have to leave law enforcement? This is not good. But my pay manager called me a couple hours later. She saw I wasn't doing good, got me back into an appointment with the psychologist, and they got me over that hump. But a year later, she gets me into surgery. And the surgeons are like, yeah, I think we're a good candidate. This is kind of a newer procedure that we've done where we're able to go in and cut open the area with the problem and clean out the scar tissue. So they don't really like to, before they didn't want to mess with it, because if they cut your leg open to clean out the scar tissue, how do you control the new scar tissue that's going to grow? And can I make it worse? And so they didn't really want to, wasn't necessarily an option. But these surgeons had come up with a method where they could protect the nerves while it's healing. And so they went in there, boom, 90% of the pain was gone like that. And I was ecstatic. I was so happy. And so my pay manager's like, hey, we're going to spend about 2 months weaning you off. And this is before they had Suboxone and the other stuff that actually is really great. And I'm glad they had it because I did eventually get on Suboxone. But, they're weaning me off. And as I'm getting down, I was taking 8 a day is what I was prescribed. And when I got down to 1 or 2 a day, I was really missing it. I was like, no, these are my happy pills. Wait a minute, I'm not as happy as I used to be. I don't have this really good rushy feeling I used to get because I could only take it twice a day, and I don't like this. And it was around that time that my workers' comp case gets closed out, so I get transferred out of pain management, and I go back to my family doctor, and this is again before records were shared across the platforms, and he asked, how's that leg doing? I go, still hurts, still in pain. He goes, oh, okay. I go, yeah, my pay manager, I don't have one anymore because it's not workers' comp. He goes, okay, no problem. What are you on? 8 a day. Okay. And I walk out of there with a brand new prescription for 8 a day. And that takes me going.
Okay. I've never been an addict. So walk me through this. If the pain is like 90% gone, is it a psychological thing that you're just, man, these pills just make me feel good? Is that what it is?
Yes. And I say 90% in the beginning because there's something that comes up later on. There was 10% of the time where I would feel pain. I'd go on like vacations where we would walk a lot. We like to go sightseeing on our vacations, so we'd do long walks and the pain would come back. So that played into another reason why I really didn't want to get off them, because I was like, well, what happens if I'm not taking these anymore and this pain comes back? What am I going to do? I'm not going to have them to take them. But the taking of the pills was psychological. It was just this rush of feeling good. You just felt happy. Just were in a good mood, and you're like, la-da-da. And you almost get an energetic rush. Like I said, I wouldn't get, dopey or, tired. I would get energetic. And it's because of the way it interacts with your brain. You feel so good. I could go now. I'm not feeling what I didn't know then was some of the effects of withdrawals. And withdrawal makes you feel very tired. It saps all your energy. And so this would bounce you back up. And so it'd be like, oh, yeah, I could go. And so that's how it was. And I couldn't wait to have that happen. Some days at the end of my shift, it wasn't really like fiending. I wasn't like, I have to go home and go take a pill. But it was like, I kept them in my car. So as soon as I changed out of my clothes and got my car in the parking lot at the station, I could pop a pill and drive home. And I'd be fine. I had about a 25-minute ride home, and about 20 minutes into the ride, so all the stress from work and everything would just go away. It's like taking a drink when you get home.
So you were dealing with these homeless and you were dealing with drug addicted at the same time. Did you ever have struggles within your own mind going, hey, I'm advocating, hey, you guys can help yourself, and on the other side, you're not helping yourself.
Yeah, so it was, by the time I got into the homeless outreach and we really grew, I was about 7 years into taking the pain meds. 6 years into taking the pain meds. And I knew I was addicted. There was no doubt in my mind. Like I need them for the pain that was periodically happening, but I'm taking them because I need them. And their depression has started to kick in because like, I don't want to be addicted. And now I was starting to drink because the pills weren't enough. And I was running out of pills faster than I used to. And so I offset it with heavier drinking when I was taking less pills till I could get my refill. And so I was getting really depressed. And so I would come home and look at myself in the mirror and just be like, wow, you're some kind of piece of shit. Because here you are talking up a great game to this homeless person on the street who's living in a tent, if that, and trying to talk him into the importance of getting into sobriety and getting into a program. And you can't even get yourself into a program, And so there was a lot of guilt and shame that I would carry with me when I would go home at the end of my shifts.
I'm assuming that a lot of people that were working with you never knew. So what is it? What does that say about the culture of policing where you can't, I don't know, show vulnerability, can't say, hey, I got a real problem, guys? I mean, now that you've been through it, what do you think?
No, you can't. Imagine being a police officer and going to someone in your department and saying, I'm a drug addict and I need help. I didn't know I had complex PTSD back then. I didn't know why I was taking the pills. I'm like, it made no sense to me, quite honestly, other than I like the happy feeling. But for me, it was like, I'm in a great marriage. My kids are doing great in school. I'm not having any issues. I'm rocking it at work. I mean, I'm a lieutenant, right? I'm running this homeless outreach.
You're still getting promoted, the whole thing?
Yeah, and next, I'm sitting there in my office one day and I get a call from someone on the staff of the mayor's office. I hang up the phone and I sit there and I go, when did I become the guy that someone from the mayor's office calls direct with an issue? That goes to the chief's office, but no, I'm the guy now that's so well known in City Hall, right? But inside I'm suffering. Inside I'm depressed. Inside I'm taking this pill. I'm drinking, eventually it was almost a half a bottle of 750 milliliter bottle of vodka every night. But I'm coming to work sober. And so here's what we do as addicts. They call them working addicts. It's such a horrible misnomer because we're not really functioning addicts. We're barely surviving, but they call us functioning addicts. So, I don't take pills at work and I don't show up to work drunk. So I'm not that bad. I'm still a good cop because I'm getting promoted. I'm running this unit. I'm highly respected. I've gotten a few awards. I've gotten some medals of valor. I'm a good cop. I'm not a bad drug addict. And nobody sees it. I ate lunch every day with my boss, almost every single day. And after everything that happened, he's like, and he felt a little bad. The people who were closest to me at work at that time were like, I feel so bad that I didn't notice it. I go, because I hid it. I hid it well. Didn't hide it from my family. I thought I was, but I didn't hide the drinking from them. Pills a little bit, but the wife suspected. She'd find the empty pill bottles and like, that's weird. Why does he have this empty pill bottle? But yeah, the culture is, you can't ask for help like that. And even with mental health, even had I known I had PTSD, I still wouldn't ask for help because you don't know. They tell you, hey, all you got to do, say you have an alcohol addiction, all you got to do is go to our behavioral science unit, which is our IAP, and they'll take you up, they call it the farm, they'll take you up to a detox place for 30 days, and you'll stay there and you'll detox and you'll come back and you'll get cleared to come back to work and there's no consequences. As long as you self-admit, even if you get a DUI, you're going to get punished, but they still let you go up and detox for the 30 days and cover your family leave and make sure you get taken care of. If it's your first offense, you're not going to lose your job. But the guys who ended up at the farm, you're like, yeah, those are the drunks. And you would see cops show up to work drunk and they would get in trouble. You'd look over, cops like rocking back and forth in lineup. And the next thing you know, the lieutenant's looking at them and we're all looking at them. And they're like, oh, here it comes. Lineup's over. And next thing you know, Officer Doe, my office now. And you don't see him for a month. And then he comes back. But a lot of times they're still struggling, so they get put into records or somewhere else, so you never see them again. So that's the other fear, is like, well, I haven't seen so-and-so come back to full duty yet. You don't know. It's not because they're getting punished, it's just they weren't ready to come back. They're still dealing. 30 days of detox is a drop in the bucket towards sobriety. That's just your beginning step. That's not going to cure you of your addiction. It's just going to get you in the right mind and get you the help you need. And it's an important step, but yeah, it's not the end all to get you out of it. So yeah, there is this stigma, and it's still there. I still hear horror stories, and I call them horror stories because I think they're absolutely unfair for someone to go to their department and say, hey, I had this incident, or I've had a buildup of incidents and I'm struggling mentally, and my therapist says I have PTSD, and the next words out of the chief's mouth is, okay, great, we're going to medically retire you. Well, nobody wants that. So you're going to lose your job now and risk that, or just try to suck it up and try to get through this and not tell anybody. And that's what happens.
You used the term complex PTSD. Do you think, you mentioned, we talked about you getting shot at by these gang members, almost run over. I'm sure you had hundreds of other incidents where you're seeing horrible things are happening to you. Do you think that that all contributed to you becoming an addict?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm not making excuses, right? But I am saying that this job, so complex PTSD is a cumulative buildup of trauma. So I didn't have flashbacks from either of those two incidents. I didn't have nightmares. I didn't have your typical PTSD symptoms where I was hypervigilant or constantly, having these flashbacks or waking up in the middle of the night screaming. I didn't have any of that, which is why I didn't know what was going on with me. But that's not how complex PTSD manifests itself. It is a buildup. So we always talked about in police work, I don't sleep that well. And everyone in the lineup goes, I don't sleep well either. Okay, it's the job. I like to go home and have 2 or 3 drinks before I go to bed. Oh yeah, I do too, because it's the job, right? And so all these things that do manifest, we don't attribute it to the PTSD, we just attribute it to the job. We have a tough job and we see bad stuff and it makes us feel bad in a little bit. And so we try to push through that and don't associate it with the fact that we sleep 2-3 hours a night or we have insomnia. I used to have horrible insomnia where I just wouldn't sleep for like 3 days in a row. And I just thought, oh yeah, I'm a cop. That's what happens to us. We don't sleep. But no, those are all symptoms of PTSD. And nobody teaches us how to recognize that. And so by the time you learn that, you've probably hit a stage where now something is seriously wrong with you or your career. And so, yeah, it's all those incidents. And something else that I found very interesting is a lot of us come from childhood trauma, like I said. And so we go into these fields of work, into these careers where we didn't feel safe as children. So we go into a career subconsciously where we're going to make other people feel safe because we want to create a safe environment because we didn't have that growing up. So you see a lot of that. And it was interesting when I found that out through my therapist and talking to other people that was the case, but it makes sense. It makes absolute sense. And so now you have this childhood trauma, you go into a career that just becomes layers of trauma. And one of the statistics I found really interesting, I think really opens the eyes of civilians who aren't familiar with what happens with first responders and trauma, is that the average person will have anywhere from 4 to 7 traumatic events in their life. Police officers, first responders, fire, paramedics, whatnot, we're averaging 3 to 4 a month. So you take a 20 to a 30-year career, depending on where you're at, you're in the 400s and 500s, traumatic events. We're not supposed to do that. That's not supposed to happen. That's not normal. And what I tell cops, and when I tell first responders, like, listen, we are normal people having a normal reaction to abnormal shit. It's okay. It really is okay to go, damn, what happened last week on that DV call has me messed up, and I don't know why. And you didn't see somebody beat up or killed or a child beat to death. It was just a bad DV call, and it's affecting you. But you can't, because you know what? Suck it up, buttercup. That's your job. And if you can't do that, if you can't get through that, this ain't the job for you. The biggest bullshit line you will ever hear in your career is a cop saying that to another cop, because that is the biggest lie out there. I don't care what you say, your brain is not ready yet for the amount of trauma that you see. But if you have the right tools and you have the right therapy and the right mindset that gets you prepared for this, yeah, you'll get right through it. There's a lot of cops and firefighters who do 30 years and never have an issue with it. And I wish I knew their secret formula, because I would teach it to everybody I could.
I wish I did too, because I talk to guys like you that are in your situation. I talk to other guys that have been in multiple shootings, and it doesn't bother them at all. And yeah. I can't figure it out. How long are you addicted before the incident happens that basically ends your career?
10 years. It's 3 years of the pain. So was it an addiction? Was it not addiction? But overall 10 years on the opioids, but 7 years of I should have been off it and I was still taking them.
Okay. Tell me what happens and walk me through how you rationalize ultimately going into the pharmacy.
Yeah. So like I said, I had started to struggle with depression. And the more years I got into this addiction, the stronger the depression got. And, it came a point where it was getting harder and harder to make my prescription last. But there's always a network of cops who've been hurt, who don't like their pain medicines, who hate it. And they're more than happy, like, oh, you use it for your leg? Yeah, you can have mine. They make me sick, or they make me nauseous, or I don't like the feeling. Or you have family members, like I said, I have family members on opioids, and they have no problem. Oh yeah, you want some? Yeah, I don't use them all. That became harder and harder because they started changing the laws and how soon you could get them refilled. And so, like I said, I started supplementing more alcohol to the point I was drinking a half a bottle of vodka every night. And now I was suicidal. And it was ideations in the beginning. But the last 2-3 months before my incident, it was almost nightly. It was almost nightly of like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't know what's wrong with me. I still didn't know I had that form of PTSD. And I'm just like, I'm never going to be able to get out of this addiction. I tried to stop drinking on my own. And I'm not going to ask for help. And I started to plan out how I would kill myself to make it look like an accident. I was going to drive my car off a cliff and just make it look like an accident. I even said, I'll just down a half a bottle of vodka 2 minutes before I drive off the cliff, so they'll just think I was drunk and crashed, and no one will know it was suicide. Because I didn't want to do that to my daughters or my wife. I didn't want to cause them that trauma, although the reality of it is everyone would have known it was suicide. Nobody would have believed it, right? And they were already traumatized. They already knew. My daughters knew I was drinking. That was one of the hardest things to hear after my incident, was that my daughters knew all along. And one was a teenager, one was just barely out of her teens. And so those last 2 months was just a struggle every day. And I had already moved out of the homeless outreach unit. I was back at a district station. I was the acting lieutenant most days there. I was number 2 on the lieutenant's list. I'd been waiting 1.5 years to get the promotion. It should have came through already, but COVID slowed down all our promotions. And I kept telling myself, okay, once I make lieutenant, I'm going to go ask for help, because then I don't have to worry. Like, I have the permanent promotion, so they can't take it from me. And if I go ask for help, the worst they could do is go, you got to retire. And it's all right, I'll have my bars and my gold star, and I'll have the pay, and all will be good. But it was just taking forever, and that was adding, to my stress in a way. And as we approached the day, I was almost out of pills. I had 1 pill left, actually, and I was 8 days away from when I could actually get a refill. And family members that I could usually bum some off of couldn't do it anymore because their prescriptions were tightened up. And it was just panic, like, okay, once I take this 1 pill, I'm done. I have no more pills. And I had gone into withdrawals before. I'd run out before, but never that long. 1, 2, 3 days maybe, max. And the first day or 2 aren't too bad. The third day is when it really starts the diarrhea, and you just don't even want to get out of bed. You just feel like you have the worst flu in the world. It's just, but I was supposed to be leaving in 4 days to Mexico for a destination wedding for a family member. And I'm just thinking, there's no way I'm dad, so first of all, I'm in charge of flight details. It's my job to get the passports and the tickets and the boarding passes and make sure, that's my job. And I'm going to be laid out in bed. And then I'm going to be on a plane with almost uncontrollable diarrhea for 5 hours. I'm like, no way. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I'm just like rolling through my head. And I thought kind of Craigslist. Can I go on Craigslist and get some? But I had never worked in narcotics. I really wasn't that in tune into how you get drugs on Craigslist. And also fentanyl had just started. And I'm like, ooh, I don't want fentanyl. I don't want to die from an overdose. I want to go buy some hydrocodones and find out that they're pressed with fentanyl and then overdose. But I just thought, you know what? It's kind of like robbing a bank. There's no victim. So I'm going to go into a pharmacy. I'm just going to give them a note, ask it for my prescription, what I like to take, which is Norco. And that's exactly what I wrote on the note. Give me all your Norco. And then when I get back from Mexico, I'm going to get help because this is bad. I finally have hit rock bottom. So I'm going to get these pills, go to Mexico, come back, and I'm going to go ask for help. But I got to get these pills. And so that's what I'm going to do. So I walk into the pharmacy. It's COVID, so I got my COVID mask on and a hoodie up and, hand them a note. It says, give me all your Norco. And on the back of the note, I wrote, I'm sorry, and showed them both sides of the note. I brought a gun with me. I brought a small revolver with me because I had told myself, if the police show up, I'm going to shoot and kill myself because I'm not going to go to jail. And that was my intent. It's like, if they show up, I'm going to kill myself. And worst planned robbery in the world, right? I parked my car almost a block away in a different parking lot. As I'm sitting there, I would at a busy time. So the pharmacy's busy. There's like 5 customers waiting, the whole full staff of pharmacists behind the counter. And I see the pharmacist pick up the phone and call 911. I could see her mouthing my description. I heard her say white male. I could clearly see that she said white male. Now, I did this in the city I live in. It's not a big city. It's not a big department. Like, you call 911 in San Francisco, it might take us 3-4 minutes to get there. That's not happening in this city. And I don't move. I just sit there and wait. And they're delaying and they're delaying and they're delaying. And I'm just sitting there. If I just took off running, I would have gotten away. I would have been long gone before the police got there. But no.
Do you show them the gun?
I don't show them the gun.
Okay.
I say I have a gun on the note, but I don't show it to them. I find out later from talking to the police officers that after they reviewed the body-worn camera, because they didn't know I had a gun until they got me handcuffed, and I told them I have a gun tucked. I had a little holster on the side. They said when they reviewed their body-worn cameras that I had reached for it 3 times while I was going down to my knees. And I have no recollection of that. So I think it was in my head to do it. And, me being a Catholic, I believe 100% that God stopped me from making that mistake. But I was done.
But how crazy is it that you say, I'm going to do this robbery, but man, when I get back to Mexico, then I'm going to ask for help?
Yeah. I should have asked for help that day. Screw the damn vacation to Mexico. I should have been up in rehab, which is where I ended up. I ended up in rehab anyway while my wife and daughters had to go on this vacation. Their dad got arrested for robbing a pharmacy, and now they have to go to this destiny wedding of family members who all now know. And, that screwed me up for the longest time, that I caused all that to them. And yeah, none of that. If I'd asked for the help, I would have went up there. I still would have gotten my promotion. They wouldn't have stopped my promotion because of that. I would have gotten the help. I would have came back. And as it turns out, a month later, the promotions came out, and I would have gotten that promotion. And I did it.
So you get arrested. Play that out for me. What happens? You get arrested. They take you right to jail?
I get arrested.
Wait a minute. You get arrested. You tell them you're a police officer?
First words out of my mouth. I'm a police officer and I have a gun on my hip.
And what did they do?
I don't even know. I'm sure they all went in full on, oh shit, what the fuck? But they put me in the back of the car right away. They take my car keys out. I tell them, it's parked over there. It's a brown truck. It's parked over there. I tell them where it's at. I go, there's nothing in it. But I get in the back of the patrol car and I just break down. I just start sobbing like a 5-year-old kid. Start banging my head on the cage. They had to come in there and like, stop banging your head. We're gonna have to hog tie you. Just don't. And then they just left an officer there with me. They take me to the station. I'm at the station a good 2 hours. So I find out later their phones are lighting up all over San Francisco. They're calling my chief, they're calling the command staff, they're calling my direct captain. And there's no secrets in my department. Once something like that happens, it's probably everybody in the department knew within 30 minutes, I'm sure of it, once the first phone call came through. So yeah, they keep me there for a while. I finally I dropped my daughter off at Cheer, and I was supposed to go pick her up in an hour and a half. And I realized I've been here an hour and a half. And I'm like, crap, my family doesn't know where I'm at. They don't know anything. I found out later, my wife thought I'd killed myself. Because they're like, where's Dad? They're calling my phone, they're texting me. I didn't show up to pick up my daughter. They're driving around trying to ping my phone. They can't get a hard ping on it because I'm inside a big concrete building. And my wife told me later on, because she knew I was having these suicidal ideations, she goes, I was absolutely convinced you were sitting in your car with a gunshot wound to your head. And she goes, I kept thinking I should have left the girls home so they wouldn't have to see it. And that was hard to hear that from my wife and to know that I caused them that pain that night. But I did ask the officers, hey, can I call my family really quick? At least let them know. And they're like, yeah, we'll let you do that. So they treated me well. The officers who arrested me, they really did. They let me call her. I in code, and I found out later on from my first therapist, I was never able to say I robbed a pharmacy. I would say it in a roundabout way, like a pharmacy was robbed and I was involved.
Why?
Disassociation. I wasn't doing it consciously, but it's disassociation. I couldn't believe that I did that, and so I was disassociating myself by putting it as a robbery happened and I participated, instead of saying I robbed a pharmacy. It took me about 6 months before I could finally say I robbed a pharmacy. And so I call her, I let her know. She bails me out of jail about 4 a.m, and she's just in complete shock. And then I have to go home and tell my daughters. And so I'm at the back up a little bit. I'm at the police station for about 2 hours. They finally take me down to the county jail and book me in. And of course, they put me in a holding cell by myself. And I grabbed the phone cord on 2 different occasions and tied it around my neck. I was going to hang myself in the cell. And I just stopped myself both times. Because I know you don't have to be hanging in the air to hang yourself. I had people in jail all the time that were able to hang themselves from a bar and not be elevated.
Do you think you got treated, because I know some of these idiots who leave comments, do you think you got treated besides the phone call maybe to call your family? Mm-hmm. And you could make the argument that they'd probably let people do that. I don't know. Do you think you got treated any differently because you were a cop that night?
I don't think I was given special treatment, but they did arrest a cop, so it's not going to be the same. Like, they didn't leave me alone in the holding cell at the station. 2 cops sat there with me the whole time. I wasn't even put in a holding cell.
Because why? They wanted your safety because they knew other people would try and get to you, or because they thought you were going to kill yourself?
They thought I was going to kill myself. They told me later on they were not going to leave me alone, and they were not going to even put me in a cell because they didn't want to risk not being able to get in there in time for me to kill myself. So they just sat 2 young girls. I found out both these officers had less than 2 years in, and they had a hard time with it. But they didn't treat me special. I mean, you're entitled to 3 calls anyway. So you get to call whoever you want. You don't have to call an attorney, So if I want to use one of my calls to call my wife, that's absolutely within the right. And so, yeah, they let me do that. And then when I got down to the county jail, it's just policy there. You have unlimited access to the phone while you're there. So you can make as many phone calls as if you want once you get in the holding cell, but only for 24 hours. Then after that, it locks out and you have to have money on the books in order to make those calls.
So really no special treatment other than making sure you didn't kill yourself. And they probably, given the fact that you were breaking down the patrol car, somebody else does that, they're probably going to put a suicide watch on them too.
Yeah. Anybody who had that kind of breakdown, they're going to keep an extra eye on them. They don't want that liability.
How long have you been married?
We just celebrated 30 years last February.
So what is your What is your wife thinking what is she saying when she picks you up from jail?
Just complete shock. Absolute shock. She just can't make heads or tails of it. It didn't make sense to her. She knew I was struggling, like I said, with the alcohol and suspected the pills. She thought it would be suicide over something like that.
But if she thought it was suicide, I mean, like, she's thinking, okay, he's probably killed himself. Mm-hmm. What was preventing her from pulling you aside and going, dude, I love you. We've been married. Let's figure this out. What do you think was preventing her from doing that?
She was scared and didn't know what to do. You know, I have asked her that. And there was even times, and I love you, honey, there was times where I was mad at her during this addiction. Like, why doesn't she have a intervention with me? She should do, you know, it's her fault. And it's a blame game.
Yeah.
Addicts do. You blame everyone else for your issues a lot of times. So to me it was, you should be giving me an intervention. You're my wife. And like you said, you should be pulling me aside and saying, hey, you need to get help. She would talk to me like, honey, this is not good. And honey, you're drinking a lot. And honey, you know, you're having suicidal ideations. And I was like, no, I'm fine. And I would tell her the same thing. You know, once this promotion comes through, I'll ask for help. And the promotion was supposed to be coming through any day. Like I said, it had been delayed a year. And they wouldn't tell us. They would just say, yeah, it'll be soon. Yeah, it'll be soon. So we kept thinking, those of us who were on the waiting list just kept thinking, oh, it's going to be any week now. Like, any day we're going to get that phone call that, hey, your promotion's come through. We'll see you up at the academy Monday for orientation. And so in my mind, it's going to happen any minute, you know. Meanwhile, I'll just kind of work through this addiction.
I don't know the relationship that you and your wife have. So why didn't she just leave you?
She didn't leave me during the addiction because she loved me. And she really thought I was going to get through it. The arrest was tough on her. She considered it. But she also felt that she owed it to me. You know, at that point, we'd been married 25 years. And she goes, I'm not going to give up on 25 years of marriage. And she even said, she goes, what would that make me to leave you at your worst? She goes, you wouldn't leave me at my worst. And I wouldn't have. I would never leave her at her worst. And so for her, that was it. She just did not believe that I deserved to lose her too on top of everything else. It's been tough. It's been a rough 5 years.
What was tougher? Was it her picking you up at the police station or having to tell your daughters?
Telling my daughters, hands down. Now, and the same thing. I just didn't tell them I went into a pharmacy and robbed it. I did the same thing. My wife even said, I said something like, a pharmacy was robbed. And that's all I would say. I wouldn't even say I did it. I just said a pharmacy was robbed. I didn't even know I was doing that. Like I said to a therapist, like, yeah, you know, when you talk about this is how you say it in like a third person way. But that was hard. That was the hardest part. And then later on within that first couple months to get feedback from, like, no, Dad, we knew you were drinking. I was a quiet drunk. I grabbed my bottle of vodka, I hid it in my bedroom. And because I was working day shift, I usually went to bed around 8 o'clock at night. Around 7, I would just go to the room and just drink and drink and drink until I finally passed out.
Did they tell you why they thought you were drinking?
Oh, because on the weekends when I didn't go to bed early, I would be out in the living room watching TV, nodding off and, you know, slurring my speech and, you know, not being able to. I wasn't a fall down drunk, but it'd be quite obvious that I was unsteady on my feet.
What was your lowest point? Through this whole thing, what was the lowest point?
The arrest. I mean, jail was bad, but that arrest was the end of everything for me. Was the end of everything I had up to that point. I'll say that.
One of the podcasts that I watched you on, I thought it was really interesting because I think it was you were at rehab and the news. Can you tell that story?
Yeah. So I'm arrested on Wednesday. Friday morning, my department, the behavioral science unit, well, they're at my house the next day, but Friday, they were there at 10 in the morning and they drove me up to the 30-day rehab. So I get up there Friday afternoon. I go into my room with my roommate. He does a quick orientation with me, and your first 2 weeks up there, they're your buddy. They're supposed to make sure you're okay and make sure you get your food and stuff. And I skipped dinner. I'm just like, no, I'm not hungry. I'm just gonna stay here. I'm still crying. I'm still just screwed up. And Next morning, Saturday, he wakes me up and he's like, hey, you got to come eat something. You can't just sit here the whole day. Come on, let's go. I'll walk you in there. So the room where we ate and where we had all our meetings and did pretty much everything was in like a great hall, if you will. It wasn't that big, but there was a big TV in there, and that's where we watched movies or TV. And so in the mornings, I always had news on. And so, of course, I walk in there, and what comes on the news is the story about me being arrested. And I walk in, and right there's my face, a picture of me in my uniform that they grabbed off of social media, and the story about me robbing a pharmacy. And I just turn right back around and go straight back to my room. I was like, nope, I'm not going in that room. All those people in that room just saw me on TV. Well, they already knew. They'd already told the clients up there, hey, we're getting a client up here. This particular spot that we go to, this rehab, is first responder competent, culturally competent with first responders. So the vast majority of first responders in Northern California that have an addiction issue will end up at this particular rehab place. It's an excellent place. It's really good. It's not schwanky, but you definitely got to have really good insurance to get into it. And it's open to anybody. It's not just for law enforcement. But there was already, as I found out, there was already 2 people there from my agency that had already been up there several weeks.
But 2 people from your agency, but are the rest just normal people?
Just regular. There was another firefighter and another cop from another agency, and the other 23 people were just regular citizens. Everything from a guy that worked in tech to a guy that ran his own construction business.
So you go back to your room, and what happens?
Maybe 30 minutes later, there's a knock on the door, and it's 2 of the women who were going through the program, and they're like, they kind of decided amongst themselves that it was probably better with a female than a guy. They kind of got the advice from the other cops from my department who were there too. And so they're like, come on, just come for a walk. You don't have to talk. You don't have to do anything, but you can't be in your room. It's not healthy. And they embraced me up there. That's when the first time I learned that, you think of, for me, I used to think of like AA, going to an AA meeting is in the basement of a church, and everyone's in there drinking coffee and smoking and telling their sob story about how they ended up being an alcoholic and how they've been sober for 5 years, and here's your coin, and yay, everyone, that's it. And it really isn't like that. I went to this meeting and everybody in a way cared about me. They wanted me to get through this. They wanted me to get sober. They wanted me to survive this. People are coming and going, right? Because you're there for 30 days, but my 30 days started after other people's had started, and then new people came in while I was there. But it really is truly a place of healing and support. And you realize, okay, what I go through as a cop is different, but my addiction isn't that different from everyone else's. Everyone else in that room, their addiction wasn't that dissimilar to me. Mm-hmm. Whatever their levels were, whatever their drug of choice was, didn't matter. It was the same things that you experienced going through in your head, and how you felt, and shame and guilt and suicide, all that they all experienced for whatever different reason. Most of them came from childhood trauma, which is when I first started thinking about, wow, there's this addiction thing. Childhood trauma causes a lot of addiction in people, unfortunately. And something really bad, like made my childhood trauma look like I had ice cream and cake one day out of the year. That was compared to what some of the stories they would tell. Because there's a point up here where they want you to, they call it your how, the, what's it stand for? Honesty, openness, and why. So they just really want you to share with the group, like tell the group how you ended up in addiction. And it's cathartic. A lot of people like, how can you do that? Like now, like when I do these podcasts or do my public speaking, people always ask me, is it hard to tell your story? I'm like, no, because I really believe that I am helping other people, especially other cops and first responders. I've already gotten that feedback that when they hear this and the resilience and that you could survive it and what getting healthy looks like, but more important, breaking that stigma of this disease of alcoholism and the PTSD. So that 30 days up there was, like I said, it's a great start, and it gets you on the road to your recovery.
So you said your lowest part was when you got arrested, but I would think that, and you tell me, a close second has got to be when you actually have to go to jail.
Yeah, that's up there. I had a year to kind of process everything. I'd had about 6 months of therapy by then. I relapsed twice on the alcohol. It's unfortunately that's what it's hard to be sober the very first time. I try to be honest with people that you probably will relapse, and it's okay. There's a saying of it's progress, not perfection. It's not an excuse, but I was just dealing with a lot. Loss of my career, loss of my whole identity, and the unknown of, am I going to prison? Am I going to county jail? Am I getting probation? And my attorney just couldn't give me a solid answer. He was back and forth between the DA's office and the judge on exactly what they felt was the appropriate punishment for me.
And did you go to jail or prison?
I went to jail. I went to county jail.
Okay. For how long?
I was sentenced to a year, but I did 6 months. Everybody who goes in gets automatic 50% credit time.
Right, because you're in California anyway.
Yeah, the good time credit for overcrowding. But
do you think you got treated differently? Do you think you got treated better or worse? Do you think they made an example of you because you were a cop, or do you think you got a little bit of a break because of the work that you had done with the homeless and drug addicted before?
I honestly believe that my sentencing was in the reasonable lot. It could, some people could say it was on the lower end, and so they took care of me. Other people are saying it was on the higher end, that they really should have not have hammered me with jail time because of my 31 years of law enforcement and helping the homeless and helping people. I don't think they gave me a lesser or a harder sentence because I was a cop.
Do you have an opinion one way or another? Do you think what you got was fair?
I do. I think it was fair. I would have loved probation. But, straight probation would have been nice, but I think it was fair.
You had a year to prep. Did you worry about being a cop going to jail?
Yeah, like I said, I worked in the sheriff's department, so I worked in corrections, and I understood how the process works. So I knew that I would be put in administrative segregation. I knew I was not going to be out in mainline with everybody else.
Okay, so what does administrative segregation mean?
So it's kind of like solitary. Basically what it means is you only get to get 30 minutes a day out of your cell, because that's the federal minimum that they could do. So you get 30 minutes out, and in that 30 minutes is your opportunity to shower and make a phone call. And that's it. That's pretty much one day you're in the common area, but there's no one else out with you. You're out by yourself because everyone there is segregated from the rest of the population for a variety of reasons. You have child molesters, or they call the chomos. You have gang members who are dropouts who say they're no longer gang affiliated, so they can't be in general pop because their former gang partners might attack them. Some have just been getting into too many fights, and so they can't be in general pop. But nobody's out at the same time as anyone else. They're very cautious about it. Even if I was out and they were going to be transferring an inmate in, I had to go lock down for the time it took for them to walk the inmate from coming into the pod and locking them into their cell. They're just like, we're not taking any chances with you. That was the hardest part, is being locked in the cell for 23 and a half hours a day. It really just, you have nothing to do. You don't have TV. Now they're starting to give out little tablets, from what I've heard. But, I was fortunate that after about a month or two, I was able to move cells and get what they call TV shots. So if I sat on the floor and leaned against my toilet, I could look out the window and see the TV and hear it in the daytime because it was loud enough. And then at night, they would just put the closed captioning on. Maybe the only, I don't even think it was because other inmates were up too. I didn't sleep well, so I was usually up till 2 or 3 in the morning. There's like 3 or 4 of us with the TV shot, so they generally left the TV on with the closed captioning so we could watch TV, in the middle of the night. Generally, they're supposed to shut it off at 11, but that's like a really soft rule there. So that wasn't particular to me.
So no interaction whatsoever with anybody.
They can come to your cell and talk to you, and they would. I get remanded in court. The jail's across the street. It's really weird, their policy. It's for everyone, not just me, but you literally get into a van and you drive out the driveway, across the street into another driveway. And then they unload you from the van and walk you into the county jail. It's like, this is kind of silly. I go, don't you guys have like a walkway or something? Like a base? It was just bizarre. They're laughing too because I was laughing. I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing. They're like, yeah, we've talked about it. They go, back in the day, we would walk them, but they're afraid someone might try to help someone escape. But anyway, so I get over there. They bring me up to my cell. They dress me out in red, so everyone knows I'm in administrative segregation. Everyone else is orange, but when you're segregated, you're put in red, so you stand out. And I get in my cell, and I'm just sitting there like, damn, I can't believe I'm here. And I sit down on my bunk, and it's not even, I don't think, 15 minutes later when the deputy comes. He pops on my door. He goes, hey, just give you a heads up. Everybody on the pod already know who you are. So all right, thanks for the heads up. And then the next morning, they only give out one free newspaper on the pod. It's a local newspaper that's just in our county. And there's my story on the second page. So I get to jail, and I'm in the newspaper the second day I'm there. Like the rehab is like, are you kidding me? But I will tell you this: the inmates treated me with respect. They would come to my door, just kind of ask me questions. First question has always been, did you really rob a pharmacy? I was like, yeah, I had an addiction to pain meds, and I robbed a pharmacy. And I think that probably played into it, was that I didn't try to hide it or justify it or make myself out to be better or worse than anybody there. I'm here. I'm in jail. I'm serving my time. After that, the questions were, it's funny, I think maybe because of my age, I'm now 61. I was 54, 56 when I went to jail. A lot of it was just advice, life advice. There's a lot of youngsters there. Most of them are like in their 20s and 30s, if that. And they just want life advice. My girl won't talk to me, or, I'm trying to call my daughter, and things like that. So they took a liking to me. And I became kind of the coffee guy. So everyone who comes to jail, they want coffee. And most of these guys can't get commissary. They don't have any money. Nobody in their family is going to put money on their books, but they all want coffee. And so first day in, as soon as they get out of their cell, they start going around to every door in the pod. And it's a 2-story pod. I forget, we had like 40 inmates in there. But they're going to every door. Hey, can I get a coffee shot? Can I get a coffee shot? They just want some instant coffee. I'd always give it to them. I'd rip up a piece of paper and put it on there, slide it under the door. And I remember one of the trustees, after my 5th day of that, he just comes out, hey, Cole, hey, just be careful, because these guys are going to take advantage of you if you keep giving out coffee. And I just remember looking at him like, listen, brother, that coffee that I'm giving them is about 7 cents worth of coffee to me. I go, if they think they're getting over on me for 7 cents, I don't care. Let them think that. I go, otherwise, if a man wants a cup of coffee, I'm going to give him a cup of coffee. And I think that could just kind of change things. So after that, everyone's like, because I remember that same trustee came back about a couple of weeks later. He goes, Cole, he goes, everybody on the pod really respects you because they see you give out coffee and they think you're a solid guy. And I just wanted you to know that. I was like, well, thanks. It's like, yeah, I appreciate that. I didn't want to go in there, I was surprised that nobody came to my door to mess with me, because they could walk around. I mean, if they're at my door harassing me, the deputies would
Okay, so wait a minute. That's the question. So you're an ag seg. I'm envisioning in my head, everybody is locked down. How are these guys?
So every 30 minutes, a new person comes out during the daytime. So starting at 7 in the morning till about 8 o'clock at night.
So it's just one person. It's
one
not
person.
The whole.
No, one person comes out for 30 minutes to get locked in. Another person. So there's one person in the outside. They call it outside rec. It's really just a patio on the 6th floor that's all fenced in. Mm-hmm. So one person goes outside, and then they bring the other person out into the common area. And then 30 minutes goes by. Those two get locked up, and then they bring 2 more out. And it takes the whole day to get everyone through.
It's interesting though. It takes the whole day for everybody to get through, and they're coming to you. They're coming to you. They're asking you for advice, asking for coffee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they come to because everyone knew I was in 9 West. So if someone asks, they go check with 9 West. He'll hook you up. And so they come down and, hey, I heard you give coffee. And then there was like, oh, I heard you're that cop, and you give out coffee too. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, that's kind of cool, bro. And then guys who were there brand new, like had never seen me before, they just walked into the pod. And if they see me walking out, I'd grown this big beard. I was like bored. It's like, you're this big old giant. And so they all started calling me Peckerwood. Like, hey, Peckerwood, OG, come hit me up. And mostly was just having fun with me because I just kind of, I'll show you the picture later. But yeah, I do look like some Aryan Brotherhood convict. But I was like, I'm just going to grow a beard. I can never grow one anyway. I can't even grow anything here. So my legs don't even have hair. But I digress. But yeah, no, I mean, that made jail easier for me, just knowing I didn't have to constantly worry about someone like sliding crap or pee under my door or, just messing with me. And I because I had that year to prep, I went in there, two things. I went in there I was thinking this is going to be a really bad experience, but I'm not going to let it beat me down. Mm-hmm. And it turned out it wasn't as bad as I'd built up in my head that the experience was going to be. But I really did take advantage of it and work on myself and focus on myself and, work on some of the techniques that I'd learned in my therapy they call it cognitive behavioral therapy, work on my CBT techniques. And, because there are times where you're sitting there like, I'm in jail. I used to be a lieutenant of police and now I'm sitting dressed out in red in a jail cell. And it gets to you and you start getting really depressed. And then I go back and reflect on the tools that I've learned and how to process through it. And I'm like, okay, I'm okay now. I'm good. I'm going to get through this. And I drew out a 6-month calendar and every day checked off a day. So I had it right there, like you see in a movie. I had my little thing and I would just check off every day. So I knew how many days I'd numbered it, how many days I'd bid in and how many days I had left. So no matter what, I knew. I was like, I've been here 200 days and I have 120 left or whatever it was.
So 6 months in there. Mm-hmm. Wow. Did you, prior to you going, did you ask anybody for advice? Did you ask, hey, and maybe you didn't have anybody to ask, but I would envision, hey, I want to watch a podcast or I want to talk to somebody who's been in jail so I know what to expect. Did you do that?
Yeah. So like I said, I worked in corrections for almost 4 years in the sheriff's department. So I had a general idea what it was going to be like. I had never been to prison. So I reached out to 2 former members of my department who did end up in prison. One was robbing banks because of their addiction to, I think it was cocaine. And the other one was sent to federal prison for corruption he was convicted of stealing money from a drug dealer. But I did reach out to both of them. One gave me, the best advice he gave me was, when you go to court, make sure you have a lot of money on you so you have money on your books right away so you can start ordering some decent food. So that helped because commissary was the next day and I was actually able to order some soups and stuff. The other one was prepping me more for if I went to state prison and what that would look like. Because you could sign off and say, hey, I don't want to go to administrative segregation. I want to be in general pop. It's a little bit easier to conceal your charges there. They say they want to see your papers, the other inmates, but all it'll say on there is your charge. So mine would just said 211 robbery. It would said nothing about me being a former cop. It's like he did that. He goes, I don't want to be, because over there in prison, ADSEG is you're with all the chomos. You're just the worst of the worst. And gang dropouts don't mean they're not still actively members of gangs. They just form a new gang. He goes, so you still got to, if you're there, they're going to be like, why are you here? You're either a dropout, a chomo, or a cop. So they're going to find out there. So he had rather gone to general pop. Didn't tell anybody. But he goes, you will have to hook up with the Aryan Brotherhood. He goes, you'll have no choice. You're going to walk in. They're going to come up to you and they're going to say, you're white. Here's your welcome package. They give you a welcome package of some noodle soups, some flip-flops for the shower and stuff, and you're expected to pay it back. We're giving you this, but you're going to be paying this back. And, he didn't have to do any crimes for them, but he had to sit with them and could not integrate with the other inmates. He did end up starting his own little store there. So if you end up having people give you money on their books, you kind of start a store. You just order a whole bunch of commissary, and then it's like a barter system in there.
How did he end up paying it back?
As far as just the commissary stuff, okay, and helping when the next white guy came in, he could bring a gift package over. So yeah, so he wanted me to prep for that. He goes,
Did you get to choose whether you went to jail or prison, or that was decided?
No, that was there. Yeah, they decided county jail was more appropriate than state prison, which I'm glad. And that made a huge difference because it allowed me to expunge my record. Had I gone to state prison, the expungement wouldn't have been eligible.
Well, wait a minute. expunge your record? What do you mean?
So after you successfully complete probation on a felony charge, as long as you didn't do prison sentence, you could have done just probation, or you could have done probation and county time. You could apply for a expungement. And it's pretty much automatic in California that they grant it to you as long as you don't have any new charges. And so the day I was eligible, I went and I filled out all the paperwork. I actually used ChatGPT to help me word some of it and walk me through the process. And you don't need an attorney. You just go down to the court clerk, you present the paperwork, they'll look at it, make sure everything's correct. If anything needs to be corrected, they'll correct it for you. They stamp it, gets sent to the district attorney's office, they get a chance to review it, and then they stamp it, and they'll send you a copy that they stamped it, and then it goes to the Superior Court judge, and then they review it, and then they stamp it. And so I got mine on April 22nd. So right now, legally, I can say I've never been convicted of felony crime.
Well, that's got to be super helpful when applying for a job.
It is, because I haven't been able to get a job. And I don't know if that's because of that. I couldn't get a guard license. I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll do some security work, but I couldn't get the guard license. Now I would be able to. I was trying to go into management, but a lot of places still want you to have a guard card even if you go into management. So I'm kind of looking at that now of some other job opportunities that are kind of slowly creeping up. But the job market's hard. It's not just my record. I know a lot of cops are like, yeah, I've been applying for months. I don't know what's going on in the market. But
through this process, what was the turning point for you? Because I've got to assume you get arrested, you're super low, oh my gosh, my career's over, my life is over. Was there a turning point that happened, or was it just a time thing over time where you went, okay, this is all going to work itself out? Or was there a specific thing where you went, okay, I think I'm going to survive this?
In the beginning, I wasn't sure. I knew I wanted to. I knew I wasn't going to give up. Right off the bat, once I got into rehab, kind of got my brain cleared, got off of the drugs for a while, I was like, okay, I'm not going to let this tear me down. This is not the end of me. I don't know what it's going to look like, but this is not going to be the end of me. But once I got that diagnosis, once I went and got into therapy, and about the fourth or fifth session in, my therapist goes, okay, here's what's going on with you. She goes, you have complex PTSD. She goes, you have this cumulative effect. She goes, all the things you've told me and everything you've been through. And she goes through that. And in another session, I remember her going, I just want to tell you something about how strong you are. Because I was saying earlier, I've always had a lot of doubt about myself and whether I'm strong and not physically strong, but mentally strong. But she goes, I just want you to understand how strong you are and you don't even know it. She goes, you should have been dead 5 years ago. You should have killed yourself 5 years ago. She goes, everything that you've told me, everything that you've been doing to yourself, I would have expected you to have already committed suicide. She goes, the fact that you're still sitting here in front of me, through all of this, everything you've now gone through I hadn't gone to jail yet, but with everything, she goes, that is your sign of strength. She goes, you need to give yourself a lot more credit. And the other thing she told me is, she goes, you need to learn to love Davin again. She goes, you haven't loved Davin in a long time, and you need to love him again. And it was when I finally realized this is what was wrong with me. And it's not, some people are like, well, I will hear people say, oh, it's an excuse. PTSD is an excuse. And it's not. It's a diagnosis. It's a physical change in your brain, just like addiction is. It physically changes the makeup of your brain. They've done brain scans on people with PTSD, on people with addiction. They know that there is a physical change in the brain. But because of the brain's resilience and its neuroplasticity, you're able to rewire your brain and make it healthier than it was before. And so when I got to that level, when I knew that, okay, this is what was wrong with me this whole time. I'm not just a big fat loser, because that's how I thought I was. I'm just a big fat loser. I'm just this weak human being who can't even manage his own addiction, and walked into a pharmacy and robbed it because he's stupid, and he's too stupid to even figure out how to rob a pharmacy without getting caught. But now going back, that was my absolute cry for help. That was me subconsciously going, I don't want to kill myself. I don't want to die. I don't know how to ask for help. Let me go into a pharmacy and rob it and get caught. And it's all on the subconscious level of, I'm going to do something to get myself help. And that robbery was it. That's why I didn't leave the pharmacy. Subconsciously, like I said, I could have just took off running as soon as I saw her pick up the phone, and they would have never been there in time to catch me. But I wasn't going to do that. And there's this level of me that wanted to get caught. And here's something else. I talked about the 10% injury, the pain. I get off of the pain meds completely, stopped drinking completely. And I remember we had gone on a vacation. We went to Machu Picchu. And we did a lot of climbing, a lot of walking. I didn't have one single day of pain. And I remember telling my pain manager, I go, you know what's funny? I go, I haven't really felt any pain in months. And he's like, yeah, because your brain was manufacturing pain to justify you wanting to keep taking it.
Really?
And he says it's very common with the pain meds. So that last 10% was my brain holding on to it to justify not quite quitting it. I was very fascinated by that. I was like, wow, and I've done some research on it, and it's true. So your brain is way more powerful than you think. And it can make you do things that you don't want to do. It can make you feel things that you don't want to feel. And, I'm still working on those tools. I wish I was perfect where I could just sit here and manifest happiness every single day. And, but I have my moments, but now I know how to manage it. Now I know, okay, if I'm having this feeling, it's probably because of this. All depression comes from something else. You're not depressed because you're depressed. You have depression because of something else that's going on. So finding out what's causing that will help you get over that depression. If you're feeling anger is a feeling because something else. You don't get angry. You get angry at something, right? So I dealt with a lot of anger, right? So I'm angry because the guy cut me off. I'm angry because my wife didn't want to have sex with me last night, or I'm angry because I didn't want to have that for dinner, right? It's a result of something else. And I was just at this meeting. I still go to my meetings. And somebody said, anger is one letter away from danger. And I thought, damn, that is, especially for addicts, that is so true. Because anger is one of the things that will cause you to relapse. And I just thought that was such a great line. Anger is one letter away from danger. And it doesn't have to be addiction. I look at cops now, and I look at these use of force videos that you see, and where we even as cops go, oh shit, what the hell are you doing? But now I look at it, and I just think, is that a result of PTSD, undiagnosed PTSD? I was on another podcast, he's a retired chief, and I agree with him. He said, we don't generally hire bad cops. We make bad cops. And I think that's 100% true. I mean, we have bad apples get in. There's no doubt about it. But I think in general, we break our cops. They don't come in broken. We break them.
How? How do you think they get broken?
It's the job. It's the trauma we see. But one of the worst traumas that we experience, and we talked about this earlier, is institutional trauma. Mistreatment by your own agency. They did a recent study in the last few years where they found that, I think it was something it's around like 58%, I could be off, but the vast majority of police officers' trauma came from being mistreated by their own administration. And that was causing more trauma than the stuff we see. I talked about the complex, right? Our buildup, that repeated exposure to trauma. We're seeing death scenes and we're seeing stuff that we're not supposed to see. But then when you get institutional betrayal, when your own department turns on you, the number of people that their departments just left them, I have a friend who had a heart attack and they forced him out of the job. He ended up getting hired at another law enforcement agency. How do you do that to someone?
Right.
How do you do that to someone where we know heart attacks are presumptive in law enforcement? You have 5 years in law enforcement, you're much more likely to have a heart attack than the average citizen. You're much more likely to be an alcoholic than the average citizen. We're 4 times more likely to take our own life than the average citizen. We lose 100 cops a year, right? On average to felonious killings. We're losing 300 to suicide that we know about. That doesn't include the men and women that drink themselves to death. That doesn't include the retired officers who kill themselves because they don't generally show up on the stats, right? It doesn't include risky behavior. When you hear about an officer in your agency who's one of your motorcycle riders and was an avid motorcycle rider and they crashed their bike at 90 miles an hour into a wall, that's not bad driving. I mean, will we ever know? and some of them no. But you can't sit back. So now I look at these cops on these videos, and again, it's not a justification. Beating the snot out of some suspect on the street is not a justification. But what if we had better tools in place so that these officers don't get to that level where they're beating someone up?
Okay, so let's focus on this for a second. First of all, knowing what you know now, is there anything that San Francisco PD could have done or offered you that you would have accepted? Because you're lying to everybody. Is there anything that they could have done differently that you think now, maybe?
I get asked this question a lot. Our department, and I will say this, I believe that our department has been and still is way ahead of the game when it comes to what we offer our members. That being said, we still don't do enough to explain it and promote it. I would hear, if you got a drinking problem, we're going to send you up to the farm. And as I was talking about an AA meeting, you think an AA meeting, a bunch of old guys in a basement of a church drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes on the next break, and it seems kind of dark and dreary, and it's not like that at all. But that was like the farm. We called it the farm because it's Mountain Vista Farms. But I think of the farm as I'm being put out to pasture. I'm being sent away. I'm being put over here away from everyone else. Instead of saying, we're going to send you to this beautiful place up in Napa Valley where you're going to be surrounded by beautiful grapevines. But the idea is that it's not a bad place. It's a really great place. There's a lot of really great programs out there. You have week-long retreats that you could go to for PTSD. We should be promoting this all the time. We should be covering the cost. We should be going, hey, are you struggling? We'll give you a week, and we're going to cover the cost for you to go up here, because that investment in that cop is worth it. That could save you a lawsuit down the road, either from them suing you for PTSD that most agencies now are on the hook for. It could save you from lawsuits, from excessive force. It could save you from other issues with it. So I would only say I wish my department promoted it. And the other thing I tell people is we need to explain better what it looks like at the end when you're sitting here in this chair like I am, and what that feels like and how great that feels to wake up and be like, it is sunshine and butterflies and rainbows. Because you know what? That's where I'm at now. And those dark days are done.
You do a lot of talking to first responders, and you tell them the story that we've just gone over.
Mm-hmm.
But I know how cops are, and they're a bunch of skeptical freaking, bastards. I mean, I even have comments on the channel going, I can't believe this guy is saying this, and that's crap, and everything else, right? I make you king for the day. You're going to develop some sort of program for X police department. What would be an absolute non-negotiable for you? If you're setting something up, what's a non-negotiable thing that you're going to set up and go, no, you have to do X?
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you right now.
Okay.
It's kind of a combination, is that you have same-day programs available. Meaning, I come to you, Chief, and I'm suffering mentally, I have you in a program tomorrow. Period. Not in a week, not in 2 weeks. You have a program within 24 hours. I know it's difficult. The other two is 100% confidentiality. So let me go back. No, you don't go to your chief to ask for help. You don't go to your captain. You don't go to your sergeant. Maybe you go to your union. Or maybe you go to an outside contractor. And that's my first recommendation, is you have someone outside contracting your services. So there is no connection between your agency and you asking for help. That's kind of the non-negotiable right there, because nobody's ever going to feel comfortable in-house. I don't care how great of a sergeant you are, lieutenant, how progressive of a chief you are your cops really going to come to you and say, I need help? And on that vine, I'm going to say something that's very controversial, and I'm sure people are going to, I can't believe you said that. Peer support is bullshit. Peer support does not work. I'm sorry. I'm going to tell you that right now. Peer support is a great idea. It's a great concept, but the way everyone runs it absolutely doesn't do any good. You're going to put any cop who wants to be on peer support, give them a week, maybe, of training, and then you're going to give a list of all your peer support cops to your other cops and say, hey, call any of these guys when you're struggling. First off, most departments are way too small for anybody to trust anybody in-house with that. If they don't already have a well-established relationship, you're not going to go to a department with 200 officers and feel comfortable talking to someone in your agency. And that 1 week of training, if you haven't been through this, honestly, the best peer support people are us. Those of us who've been through this. And I'm not saying that makes us special.
Yeah.
I'm just saying until you've been through this, until you've been through some type of addiction or some type of recovery from your PTSD or whatnot, you're not equipped. Unless you go get your licensing and your LMFT or something like that, you're not equipped to be peer support. And just sitting down, having a cup of coffee and telling somebody in your department you and your wife aren't getting along, that's not going to help you. Vast majority of people I've talked to said the best help came from cops who've been through it and can be honest and open about what they've been through. Because then you don't feel alone. Then you go, he gets it because he's been there. She gets it because she had to go through it. That's where you're going to feel better. But you have to have 100% confidentiality for those officers. And you're never going to get that if they always have to go in-house.
But let me play devil's advocate with you on that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have an outside agency that you go to. But you go to that outside agency and you go, I need help. And they say, great, next week you're going to be up. At some point along the thing, isn't that outside agency going to have to tell your department something? And isn't that kind of ruin the whole...
There is, like our department is, if I had gone to BSU for help, they just would have said, Davin needs 30-day family leave. And that's it.
Okay.
So yeah, they're going to have to hear something because you're going to have to take time off.
Okay.
But that's all they need to know.
All right.
They don't need to know why. It could be alcohol. It could be PTSD. It could be gambling. It could be sex addiction. It could be pornography. It could be whatever. But that's got to be that.
But they could just say family leave. And that really is a more innocuous thing to say. And then,
Or you do it, you have the union could do it. You know, you could do it through the union. But they also have to have the resource. There's most look pretty good from what I've done, but there are some companies out there that are selling you fluff about how great their program is, and I don't really think they're equipped to get you into the right programs. You know, it's got to be all encompassing. You know, you got to have most are doing apps now, which I really like. And so now you can pull up the app and go, oh, I'm struggling today. Oh, here goes some resources. Here goes some CBT techniques that I could do on my own. Oh, here's one-touch phone numbers. I can just push this button and it's going to connect me to a therapist hotline or 1-800-COP-LINE. I've seen those. So you can open it up, 1-800-COP-LINE. You push the button, 1-800-COP-LINE. I'm a cop. What do you need? You know? So you have these other resources, but it's available to you where you don't have to go to someone else. Another thing I tell sergeants and lieutenants specifically is debriefs are great after a critical incident. But like I said, it's not the critical incidents that are taking us out. It's this cumulative PTSD that's taking us out. So you need to debrief on a regular basis. You really need to debrief every week. If I had my way, I'd say every week you should just be throwing it out there. Anybody want to talk? Anybody feel like last week was rough at that DV? And start breaking down the stigma of talking. It's going to take a while. You know, the first meeting, no one may say anything. Mm-hmm. They may all just go, okay. Then you throw out there, hey, my door's open. And be honest. Don't just say my door's open because that sounds cool. I'm a boss. I have an open door policy. And then you run in the office and shut the door and watch Jeopardy or something. I don't know. Bosses do. But it's got to be open door policy. You know, at the very least, they could come to you and go, hey, you know, Sarge, yeah, I wasn't feeling good. Is there someone you could call? Yeah, here goes a list of resources. And be prepared. But I think the debrief should happen on a weekly basis. I think you should just be able to come in. Because if you think about it, if you've ever been on a debrief, especially say after an OIS, and so they bring everybody in and they come in and you sit down in the room and they have somebody who's the CISM expert. And don't ask me the acronym, because I can't remember it. Critical Incident Support, something. Nonetheless, fancy titles. We love our fancy titles. But anyway, somebody has that expertise training. But every single one I've been to, they get in the room, and it's usually their first debrief they've ever sat in for these officers and the dispatchers and sometimes the firefighter. And everyone just kind of looks around waiting for the first person to talk. And no one really pipes up until the CISM expert goes, well, sometimes you may feel this. So if you're feeling this, it's okay, it's normal. And this is why I say this is where you have your real peer support person come in and go, hey, I'm Davin. I robbed a pharmacy. I'm a retired lieutenant of police. I'm a Medal of Valor winner, but I had some severe PTSD because I wasn't looking after myself, and this is what it looked like. Then you're going to get so then when you have the really bad critical incident, you're used to being in that room around people who are willing to talk. And then you could go, yeah, you know what? That OIS screwed me up because I know if I'd been the first one through the door, I would have taken the one in the melon and be okay with saying that, right?
Yeah.
No one wants to say that. No one wants to go, well, yeah, Marty got, I don't know anybody named Marty who got shot, but John Doe got shot in the head. But I feel bad because he went in first. I got in first. I would have been shot. It's okay. You could feel that way. It's all right. Yeah. You should be okay to talk about that in a group and not feel guilty or shame. But you need that buildup. You need to break down that stigma and that fear of repercussions in these rooms.
If somebody's watching this, what advice would you give them if you have 10 to 15 years on the job yourself? Mm-hmm. What advice would you give them if they're watching this?
First thing I'm going to tell you, it's okay to be broken. It's just not okay to stay that way. There's no shame in struggling. There's no shame in not feeling good. There's no shame in not asking for help, but you shouldn't stay that way. And so you're willing to go to the gym and work out. You're willing to go to the range and practice. You're willing to go take Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. All these things you're willing to do to buy some extra shiny stuff to put on your gun belt. Be willing to do the same thing for your mental health. If your department doesn't offer it, see if your insurance offers therapy. Most insurance will cover your therapy. It's usually a $25 out-of-pocket expense. That $25 is well worth it. And get a therapist. And then go through therapy. You don't have to do it 3-4 years. That's too long. A good year, a year and a half, and then it's almost like they're on speed dial. You know, you've learned some things, you got a relationship, and now something comes up. And it's been 6 months, but you're therapy, but now something bad happened at work or you had a death in the family. Well, you have a relationship and you know what therapy looks like. And now you could call that therapist and go, hey, you know what? I'd like to come see you. I'm struggling right now. And have that already ready to go. Therapy's great. It's the best thing I ever did. I still wouldn't know what was wrong with me without a good therapist. And culturally competent one. That's the harder part. But you really got to find someone that has worked with first responders, because a lot of them are just unfortunately not going to understand us and what we go through.
Yeah. Do you want to give a shout out to anything? Your website, your Instagram page?
Yeah, please. If you want me to come out and talk to your department or your organization, you could go to my website, davincole.com, or you could just connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to come out and share my story with everyone. I think it has meaning. I think it shows what resilience looks like. And I think it really resonates with a lot of officers. And the feedback I've gotten, a lot of people have gotten help because they hear this story. And not just mine, there's other people who share a similar story, and it does help break down that stigma for people.
Thanks for the interview. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's a joy.